All right, folks, I'm going to go over one of my favorite parts of interpersonal communication. And if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I'm so bummed that we can't do this in person because I love doing this in person. I love the interaction. I love being able to talk about things face to face. I love being able to answer your questions about things like this. But I'm going to do the best I can with what we got. All right. So conflict. Conflict is complicated, isn't it? And it's hard because a lot of people want to avoid conflict. They don't want to deal with conflict. The problem is we're just not very good at conflict. If we were really good at conflict, we can see it as an opportunity to make something awesome happen. But let's go over a little bit of conflict competencies. So what we're supposed to be doing in class is contrasting effective and ineffective types of conflict management, as well as problem-solving strategies. And we're looking to demonstrate effective conflict management and problem-solving strategies, as it turns out. All right, so with conflict and interpersonal communication, most conflicts occur between people who already know each other. So when there is a problem, it's with people that know each other. We don't tend to have deep conflict with strangers because we're not emotionally invested in them in the same way. So conflict generally tends to happen with people that we know, which makes it hard because we have emotional investments with them. And when we have the emotions involved, it makes it very hard to manage those emotions because we're feeling these emotional things as we go through the conflict. All right, so conflict occurs when people perceive incompatible goals. That means that I have this goal, you got this goal, and there's no way we can both get our goals, right? Scarce resources, and hey, there's 5 people and there's 8 slices of pizza, right? So not enough pizza to go around, right? Or interference in achieving objectives. So that's when you have a goal, another person has a different goal, and your competing goals are getting in the way of both of you getting what you want. So understanding this occurs when people perceive these things. Again, notice here, perceive. It's the perception of incompatible goals. It is the perception of scarce resource. It is the perception of this person's trying to keep you from your goals. Most people aren't trying to keep you from their goals. They just have needs that are getting in the way of you getting this goal in this way, form, or fashion. That's the only way, form, or fashion you can think of right now to figure it out. All right, part 2. What are some features of conflict? Do you agree with these people or not? All right, so conflict begins with the perception issue. Remember, we talk about perception, we go back to perception over and over again. Perception is our sense of reality. If we think this person is a barrier for us getting what we want, we're right. And because we start treating them like a barrier. And then as soon as we start treating them like a barrier, they start acting like a barrier because we treat them in the way that we perceive them to be. Conflict involves clashes in goals or clashes in behaviors, right? So sometimes you have differing goals, and then sometimes the way you behave and when it's time to get those goals or pursue those goals or navigate the issue that you're having with these goals gets in the way. Understanding conflict is a process, right? It's just a thing that happens. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just a thing. The reason why we have such a hard time with conflict is because we don't see conflict in a very good way. Also, conflict is dynamic. It's ever changing. It's ever evolving, right? One of the things that I think you should do to change conflict or see conflict differently is understand conflict is an opportunity to make something better. Because when we agree, we can't make anything better. Like if you like donuts and I like donuts, we're not going to come up with something better than donuts because we both like it, right? But if someone likes croissants and they like donuts and they want to have something that's got the amazing properties of croissants and the amazing properties of donuts, all of a sudden when we work together and we bring the best of those two worlds together, now we got cronuts, croissant donuts. You see how it's an opportunity to make things even better than we can perceive of? Because we're thinking beyond the limits of what we had normally seen possible. Conflict is an amazing opportunity to make things better, as long as we remember we're working together to try to make things better. So that's why it's a process, and that's why it's dynamic, because in any point in time in the process, you could lose your temper, and say things that aren't necessarily very helpful. Or you could be like, what do you really need? And it just kind of slows everything down. So you see how it's a process, and it's very dynamic. It can definitely changes a lot when you can choose to calm down. Kitchen sinking occurs when people shift topics from the conflict area that's being discussed, right? So if the conflict is you don't do your dishes, and then you start bringing up how nobody vacuums, and then you start bringing up how nobody mows the lawn, you see how now the conflicts widen out to all these things when our goal was just figuring out how to get the dishes done, right? Like kitchen sinking is bringing everything into this one conflict and trying to figure it out when you're already pissed. Kitchen sinking is not a good idea. Deal with this one conflict, have a successful resolution, maybe celebrate the successful resolution, and then find a good calm time to bring up your other issues when you're in a good space to deal with that conflict with each other. Don't kitchen sink. You're not going to figure out 64 problems in the middle of one argument. Take each argument one little thing at a time and figure out what you both can do to make this better. So conflicts in relationships. This is where it gets complicated, right? Conflicts typically arise when our partner is distributing or is doing patterns of behavior that we find annoying, right? It could be them like dancing early in the morning and we're still sleepy and we find that irritating. Although it's funny if you really think about it, is it really irritating that your partner is that happy in the morning and they're dancing? Like you just have to tell your partner, I'm not that happy. I can't dance with you. I need to finish my coffee first, right? But there's nothing about them being happy and dancing that should make us more upset, right? But understanding that we find people's patterns of behaviors annoying are where we have to start with, right? Because again, that's a perception. Why do you have to perceive that as annoying? Can't you perceive that as differently? Can't you ask more questions about why they do the things that they do and the way that they do them? There are also conflicts typically arise from disagreements regarding the relationship rules. How are we supposed to do these things? What is okay and what's not okay, right? Were you flirting with somebody else? Was it just misperceived kidding? Or should you be honest and be like, yeah, I kind of was flirting. Maybe I can stop doing that behavior, right? Like when you can be really honest about things, we can come to new opportunities. And then there's also just personality clashes, right? I tend to be really fiery. I tend to run pretty hot. I tend to be a little bit more of an angry person, right? And when I have my emotional level up here, my partner will meet my emotional level here, which means my emotional level usually pops up, right? So you see, and then her personality, her emotional thing goes up to here. That's not going to be helpful, right? I have to notice when I'm starting to get more emotional and then step down my emotional reaction so I can have good conflicts. Because when people meet each other's angers and ever escalating forms of emotional reaction, it's going to be hard to have a rational conversation because you keep getting more and more emotionally engaged and invested in your upsetness, right? So they can come from irritating behaviors, disagreements regarding relationship rules. So you should be very clear about what are the rules in your relationship, and personality clashes, right? We're just different people. Now, when it's time to handle conflict, there's a lot of different approaches that we can take. Sometimes assertiveness goes up and down like this, right? So we want to be very assertive when we handle the conflict, right? We want to have good boundaries. We want to be able to say what we want. We want to be able to have good boundaries about what we're going to accept and not accept as far as what people will do or how they treat us. So we want to make sure we have our assertiveness all the way up, but we also want to make sure that our cooperativeness is turned all the way up too. So our goal is to be personally assertive as possible and as cooperative as possible to work together with the party that we're in conflict with to come to the best resolution, right? And you can see there's all these little areas that happen if we have like too much assertiveness, no cooperativeness, we're competing. If we're too cooperative and we're not assertive enough, so we accommodate when we kind of just become doormats for other people. If you're not using any assertiveness or any cooperativeness, you're just avoiding problems, right? And avoiding problems doesn't help you at all. If you compromise, you're getting a little bit of what you want, but it's not being as cooperative as possible or being as assertive as possible. If you can get creative, you can find ways to win all over the place with each other. So here are these approaches, right? We've got avoidance, we've got accommodation, we've got competition, we have compromise, and we have collaboration. Professor D's favorite, collaboration. All right, let's look at these different approaches one by one. First one, avoidance is ignoring a conflict. It's pretending like things aren't happening, or it's using that passive communication to be like, boy, I really wish somebody would do the dishes. It doesn't get anything done, right? It's hoping things just resolve themselves, or it's being like passive aggressive and like hinting at things that you wish you could have, but like you're not being really assertive, Russ. So it can take the form of skirting the issue so you don't never really talk about what you want. If you avoid conflict for too long, eventually you're not going to be in a relationship with someone, because at some point in time, you're going to get sick of avoiding things and you're just going to choose not to spend time around them. Or you're going to snipe at them. Sniping them is like taking little shots at a distance. Well, you know, my last partner was a lot cleaner in the house than you are. I wish we could live in such a nasty pigsty. You notice these skirting or sniping things? Again, we don't want to do that stuff. It's not positive. If you avoid, you're going to experience a cumulative annoyance where these things start building and building and building and building and getting worse and worse and worse. And then eventually you freak out on some little thing that's not really the thing, but it's because you've been avoiding this conflict, right? You have to deal with the conflict. Otherwise, the problem's not going to go anywhere. And it can lead to pseudo conflicts. Pseudo conflicts are not really real conflicts. If you're screaming about how the dishes aren't done, it ain't about the dishes. The dishes are a symptom of a bigger conflict that you need to have a conversation about, right? Avoidance doesn't do anything about the conflict. It just makes you quiet. It doesn't get anything done, and it doesn't figure anything out. Now, the next thing people will do is they will accommodate. They will abandon one's goals and one's desires, and they will acquiesce to other people's goals and other people's desires, right? It's just kind of like, here you go, I give up. Here's what you want. It seems like it works, but the problem is you still have wants and needs. And because you have wants and needs, and you're not standing up and voicing your wants and needs, you're putting yourself in the back seat of this relationship. And then one of these days, you're going to wake up in the back seat and you're going to be like, who put me in the back seat of this relationship? Well, you did. Because you weren't brave enough to ask for what you want. You got to be able to ask for what you want and what you need to have a good relationship. Really, if you accommodate to somebody else and the relationship doesn't go well, whose fault is it? It's my fault. It's my fault. I didn't ask for what I want. And it's funny because you're mad and pissed at this other person, but you gave them everything and asked for nothing. And it didn't go well. You got to be able to ask for what you want. You got to love yourself enough to be like, hey, I want to go to the movies this weekend, dang it. Because I miss you and I really like this movie, right? You got to be able to ask for what you need. You can't just keep going and watch the same movies that they like over and over again. You got to ask for what you want from time to time. Another thing. Went to the wrong area. Another approach to handling conflict is competition. Competition is the pursuit of one's own goals without regard for other people's goals, right? This is thinking win-lose, right? I get what I want, to heck with what you want. When we start working from a competitive frame, this can trigger defensive communication. You know who does defensive communication way too often? Professor D does. Professor D gets really defensive. Like, I get emotional, and I think I'm being attacked when they're just talking about a problem that we need to fix, right? Like, I got to lower that emotional reaction. I got to lower that defensiveness and just be like, okay, what do you need? How can I give you what you need, right? Also, when we're competing with each other and we're trying to fight, we're trying to win, this leads to escalation. Escalation of emotion is never helpful in conflict. You've never screamed things out in a way that was like really great for everybody. And if you did, it's pretty rare, and it's probably not the best way to do it, right? So if you're thinking win-lose, long term, imagine if you won every single argument in your relationship. Are you going to have a relationship? Nope. Not for long. Because in a relationship where you win all the time, it means they lose all the time. And nobody wants to be in a relationship where they lose all the time, right? We want a happy medium. We want to make sure we're meeting each other's needs as fully as possible. We want to make sure that we're there for each other, and we want to make sure we're looking out for the person we're working with. And this is not just romantic relations. This is with friends. This is with business. This is with a problem you're having with you and like the cashier when they're not accepting your refund, right? We got to not just think win-lose. We got to think, how can I win? How can you win? Another thing that we got to watch out for is being really reactive. Reactivity is communicating in an emotionally explosive and negative fashion, right? So when someone's like, you need to put your clothes in the hamper, you're like, what? I've had the worst day ever, and you're talking to me about putting my clothes in the hamper? What's wrong with you? I know that seems like ridiculous, but like when we just react to things, we're not thinking about what's the need. Because like if you think about it, right? Can you put your clothes in the hamper? Yeah, I totally can put my clothes in the hamper. How long would that take? 7 seconds at worst, right? Not long at all. Super easy to do, right? But if we're reactive about things, I don't like the way you talked to my mother. Well, your mother's a blah blah. You know what I mean? You see how like we just react instead of being like, well, what did your mother say? What did I say to your mother that was problematic? Or how could I have said something differently given I have this need? Right? Do you see how like having a sense of wonder versus a sense of emotionally explosiveness or like reactive negative reactions give us the opportunity for more outcomes? We don't want to react. We want to think proactively. What else can I do? What else is an option? What else is possible, right? When we're proactive, we fix problems before they happen. When we react, we're just reacting to issues and problems, and we never really think about what we can do to keep these problems from happening again, too. So here's an example of what you can do if you're having reactive issues. These are some short-term conflict resolution tools you can do to like lower that emotional reactivity. The first one is separation. Separation, beep, you just take a break. Be like, I'm running too hot right now. I need to take a break because there's all types of terrible things on my mouth and I don't want to say them to you because I care about you and I love you. So let's take a break for a minute, right? So that's not bad because it can lower emotions. And I think it's not necessarily like the worst place to go, especially if you're really emotional. Now, what other people will sometimes do is they'll try to dominate the other person. Well, I'm the man of the house, so this is the way I say it's going to be. Or it's my dog, so it's my responsibility, so I'm going to do what I want, right? This is where one person lords over another person, doesn't give them the opportunity to have a say in the issue, and one person just makes those decisions. Again, that's another win-lose paradigm that isn't going to work very well for very long, because eventually nobody can ride in the backseat of a two-person relationship forever. Another thing that happens, and people then tend to think this is really great, is compromise, right? Well, I'll give you a little bit of what you want, and I'll give you a little bit of what I want, right? Little bits of what you want isn't everything of what you hope for, right? There's a way to think of more, right? If there's only one slice of pie in the refrigerator, and each of you want dessert, and you see that slice of pie, and you want like the whole slice, you want like a really good dessert, you could just compromise and cut the slice of pie in half and have just a little teeny measly dessert where neither of you are really truly satisfied. Or you could look at what other sweet things you can have in the fridge, right? And you could be like, ooh, we got some whipped cream. We got some graham crackers. We got some ice cream. We got some gummy bears. Let's add all that in to our slice of pie. And now we have this amazing full dessert that we both worked on to serve and give to each other, which was way better than the compromise of half a slice of measly pie. You see how we're working towards each other's best ends? That's an example of an integrative agreement. The integrative agreement video is really great, but it's 42 minutes long. And if you want to see what that looks like, go to around 8 minutes in and it will tell you how it works. But to understand the difference between a distributive versus an integrative agreement, a distributive agreement is only short term. A distributive agreement only thinks win-lose. A distributive agreement only looks for individual gain. A distributive agreement has oppositional views, like we're working against each other and only one person wins. And it only gives you an either or option. There's not a lot of other options. Whereas an integrative agreement focuses on the long-term relationship. Understanding I'm always going to work with you. How can I make sure that I work best with you? How can I make sure that I meet your needs? How can you make sure you help meet my needs, right? It puts the relationship first and foremost, knowing you're going to do business, you're going to work together, you're going to have a friendship together with this person for a long time. It looks for win-win, right? What can I do to help you get what you need? And how can you help me get what I need? How can we both work to each other's best, most positive ends? It's also a very congruent way to be like a good person throughout your life, because you're no longer just looking out for you, you're looking out for the people around you. If you look out for you and the people around you will look out for you too. And you'll tend to win more often because you're willing to let other people win when they work with you more often. You see how being a good person just helps in all areas of your life? And it doesn't just think of this or this. It's like, well, there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different issues. There's a lot of different ways we can get to the place we hope to go. How can I see and feel spaces or places where you are getting what you want and I get what you want? Or I get what I want and you get what you want in the best way possible. And how can we keep working to each other's best ends always, right? So it sees several different paths of solution. And then also when you're working with relationships, there's structural improvements you can make to the relationship to help minimize conflict in the future, to make sure that you're working for each other's mutual gain, not just in this instance, but in future instances. So it makes it so the relationship works better over time, right? Like integrative agreements and structural improvements are awesome. And I think you should do more of those things. So what we want to do is practice using collaborative conflict. So the collaborative conflict process is that we focus on the problem. What is the problem we're having? We don't think about the people, we think about the problem, right? The problem is the dishes aren't done. What could we both do about these not done dishes, right? It's not Tim never does his dishes. It's how can me and Tim get these dishes done? Right? We think about the problem. Then we try to develop what are criteria that equals a good solution. Like what would you need and what would I need to make sure that we fully get all of our needs met? I'll tell you what, when people attempt to do this, they go too fast through these two things. You need a big, long list of wonderful criteria you need for an excellent solution. And they need a big, long list of criteria that they need for a good long-term solution. The reason why I bring Chewy bars to class is because I understand if I feed you, I have so many Chewy bars that I don't know what to do with. But I do it because you work better for and with me, then I work better for and with you. You tend to pass the class better. I tend to have students I like more. Win-win, right? Brainstorm possible solutions. This is another area when you want to invest a whole bunch of time. If we were going to get really creative, what is possible? Like, what can we think beyond the first yes, no, right? If someone says either or, Take the or, what else is possible? Or what else could we do? Or who else do we know that can help this? Or what else is out there? We can get creative in really cool ways. Use criteria 2 to help evaluate solutions developed during the brainstorming in step 3. Then select the best solution using all the criteria and all the brainstorming that you had. Pick the best solution, then implement the solution. And then if it's not working, come back together, realizing you can both come back together to help each other get to the best solution. Collaboration is dope. I love it. Collaboration is treating conflict as a mutual problem-solving challenge. It results in all of our needs being met, and it is always the best way to handle conflict. Again, if you need more examples on how to understand the collaborative conflict process, this one right here, this little video, I highly recommend. Looking at long-term conflict outcomes. Long-term conflicts are best achieved through collaborative approaches to conflict, right? If we're having a problem with our mom, if we're having a problem with our partner, if we're not getting along with someone at work, like our manager at work especially, we want to think about long-term conflict outcomes because they're going to be in our life for a long period of time. And unless we can figure out a way to get along with them, we're going to have problems ourselves. So there are challenges to handling conflict. This is why you avoid or you accommodate as much as you do. Conflicts can spark really destructive forms of communication. One of the things we need to do is notice when we are at fault. P-H-A-U-L-T sounds like fault. Do not engage in conflict or delay in entering in conflict when you have these conditions. So say you gotta pee. Don't start a long conversation with having to pee. I do this all the time. If you come and visit me in my office hours and you're like, hey, I got a problem, I go, tell you what, let me go pee for like 2 minutes because I really got to pee. And I'm going to be so much calmer and so much more creative. And I'm not going to be stressed out like thinking how much I got to pee, right? If you're hungry, like hunger is a thing. If you're hungry and this conflict is in the way of you getting food, like go get the food. Or like eat during the conflict so you're not dealing with hunger and conflict at the same time, right? If you're already angry, not a good time to try to figure out conflict. If you're angry and it's time to figure out a conflict, you need to figure out how to de-escalate the anger before you're going to be really ready for collaborative conflict with somebody else where we're thinking with our highest, most rational, most other-focused being. If you're lonely, this is the reason why we can't just say, hey, I really miss you. I'd like to spend some more quality time with you. When you're lonely, you feel abandoned. And you're like, you suck. You're hanging out with your friends all the time. That's not an effective way to ask for, hey, I miss you. I'd really like to spend some quality time with you. When can we schedule something so I can hang out with you? Or tired. If you're tired, you're not having good sleep, you're already stressed out. Again, this is not a place to deal with the issue, right? If you're tired, you're like, look, you're important to me and I'm really tired. Let me get in a nap or let me go to bed thinking about the problem that you have and what can I do to come back to you when I'm much more refreshed, much more better space to deal with this issue. So remember, don't argue when you're at fault, when you have to pee, when you're hungry, when you're angry, when you're lonely, when you're tired. Also, think self-enhancing thoughts. Self-enhancing thoughts are really going to allow for perception checking and allow you to think the best of the person you're working with. If you think like the worst of the person you're working with, you're not going to have great conflict outcomes. You got to think of the best of your partner or whoever you're working with to get through this in the best as possible. So here's a checklist. Is my partner really uncooperative? Or do I just see and feel like they're uncooperative? Is it really just their fault? Or is there something that I'm doing, maybe not asking for what I need, maybe not being assertive, maybe not making my needs clear? Is the conflict really because of ongoing differences? Or is this like a temporary factor problem? Me and my partner were arguing because we have to hang out with each other like a lot. And I've been in kind of like a dumpy, grumpy mood, right? And part of the conflict was me recognizing I was in a difficult space because I can't go work out. I'm not seeing a lot of different people. I'm not getting a lot of variety. I'm an extrovert. So people give me a lot of energy and I'm not getting those things, right? So some of it was just because of the temporary factors that were happening, right? It's not ongoing structural, you're different and I'm different things. It's temporary problems that we could both work together to help for each other. And then destructive messages. These are things you don't want to do. Sudden death statements. These declare a sudden end of the relationship. If you don't stop drinking, I'm going to leave you. Which that could be a statement that you might need to make based on situation and circumstances. Here, how about this? If you don't stop playing flag football with your friends on the weekends, I'm going to leave you. That's a crazy sudden death statement where maybe the need is, I need you to watch the babies for me instead of always thinking I'm going to watch the babies for you because I know you need me to watch the babies when we play flag football. Makes sense, right? So don't do any like, if you do this or else statements. You're taking the relationship hostage. You're like, hey, do this or I'm going to kill our relationship. You see how like, I don't want to work with you if that's what you think about a relationship? Not very helpful. Not going to be able to be very creative in a space like that. When you start spilling dirty secrets or you start belt lining, this is when you do say honest information, but you're not doing it to try to like really resolve the conflict. You're trying to hurt the feelings of the person you're working with. You know better. You've done this before. I've done this before. But when you're like hitting below the belt, it's not going to make for very creative conflicts, and you're putting your relationship at risk. Both of these things put your relationship at risk, and we got to understand the relationship matters, right? With technology and handling conflict, if you see a text and you're just pissed, first off, just take a second. Go outside, like stand in the sun, do some 4-7-8 breathing, 4 rounds. Then go back and reread it. Now, when you reread it, assume the best, but look out for potential worst. If you still feel like you're not feeling it, like go to somebody else and get like their opinion. Hey, how are you reading this? Now don't go, can you believe what they said? Because that's going to prime them for negativity. How do you understand this message? Right? It gives you more perspective. If it is bad, what do you want to do when it's time to respond from a thoughtful, creative, constructive place? Then attempt to communicate as competently as possible, as calmly as is possible, while respecting the other person as much as you possibly can in this instance. It's going to help you not have 6 hours of text messaging back and forth arguments. And then you try to make your friend read like this like odyssey of a text message exchange to see if you're rational or not. Practice these and you will communicate a lot better with technology and handling conflict. When managing conflict with women, encourage the open expression of goals, right? So say, hey, my goal is this. What is your goal? Right? It's going to help you handle gendered conflict better. When handling conflicts with men, stress, hey, I want to help you get what you need, and I want you to help me get what I need, right? Because men tend to think win-lose a little bit more. With women, women are taught to like ask for straight up for what they want, right? So with women, what do you really want and what do you really need? This is what I really want. This is what I really need. When you're having a conflict with men, be like, hey, I want to work with you to get you what you need, and I want you to work with me to get me what I need, right? That form of assurance is going to help out a lot in people feeling better about the argument. Also understand that culture is going to influence how we perceive and experience conflict. So people from individualistic cultures or collective cultures view conflict really differently, right? Individualist cultures tend to be a lot more win-lose. Collectivist tends to be more like, I don't want to say win-win, because like then they don't make sure that the individual gets what they need either, right? They'll be like, well, do it because it's best for everybody, which is a form of accommodation, right? So understand that these factors influence how we'll do communication with each other. Be aware of these differences when managing conflicts across culture. Get a sense of what cultural dialectic they have. Are they more this way or more that way? It's going to help you have better conflicts with people, right? And let's see, conflict endings. Many conflicts conclude a lot more gradually than people would like. We want to have like a once and for all, just figure it out. But it's hard to do that. We need time, we need space, we need to like ponder stuff. We need to like manage our emotions so we can be more thoughtful about things, right? It's gonna take some time. It's not gonna just like happen overnight. You're not gonna wake up and be like, aha, here's our win-win. Here's our collaborative process. It takes time. But the good news is if you take the time and you really figure out what it takes to get everybody what they need, you might never argue about that problem again. How dope does that sound? Can you imagine never arguing about that problem again? It's possible if you're creative and collaborative in your approach. Serial arguments are series of unresolved issues that have to do with the same problem. And what kind of happens is somebody demands, so a partner makes demands something, and then the other partner withdraws from the encounter, right? So there's a demand withdrawal, because we never really get to what the issue is, like what's really the problem, right? What's really the issue? I'm worried that you're going to find somebody you like more than me. Well, that's a big need. That's a big concern, right? Well, I love you. And just because I work with different people who happen to be attractive doesn't mean I love you any less. That's a hard conversation. But if you can have that conversation and you can really provide some positivity and assurances, this serial argument might finally go away. How amazing would that be? Physical violence is the most destructive conflict challenge. Like when we start fighting, we don't really have an opportunity to have creative, collaborative conflict, right? Physical violence is just like competition or dominance, and that doesn't work out long term for anybody, right? And it doesn't always have to be just physical violence, right? If like you say something and I do this, that can create a chilling effect when individuals stop discussing relationship issues out of the fear of their negative partner's reactions. Again, that's one of the beginnings of the death knells of a relationship, is when there's a chilling happening, right? The person doing the chilling feels like they're getting what they need, but it's only temporary. Eventually, they're just going to leave and you're going to be alone. And you're going to be like, what happened? So, well, you intimidated people out of a relationship, my friend. That's not good. That can happen with men, women, hetero, homo relationships, whatever, right? Physical violence or the threat of physical violence is the bane of all interpersonal communication, conflict resolution. And then understand sometimes you're not going to be able to resolve all disputes. Part of effectively managing conflicts is understanding that some conflicts are going to be impossible to be resolved. Remember, values conflicts, going back to our Alligator River experiences, are the hardest ones to get past. That's where we need a ton of listening, a ton of understanding. But sometimes you're not going to be able to figure it out because everybody's not always going to get along with everybody. And sometimes if you have an issue with someone, you could be like, hey, let's do no deal. That means we're just not going to deal with this particular issue. I'm not going to give you something. You're not going to give me something. We're going to not broach or deal with this conflict right now because I value our relationship more than us figuring out this one-time thing. If it's a little thing, it'll be fine. If it's a big thing, it might be a good sign that that relationship's not built for long-term success. But understand, this is like in the single digit percentages sometimes. Like, most things are not unsolvable, but it does happen, and you have to know that that's part of what we're looking at too. So with that, that's everything I got for you on conflict. Remember, conflict's not bad. It's a creative opportunity to come up with a better solution than anybody's ever thought of before. But you both got to feel and act that way. If you both feel and act that way, mutual best outcome is possible for both you and the people you're working with. And with that, that's our final lecture for class. With that, I think the only thing you need to do is the happy assignment, and you've done everything that I need to see from you. So with that, I think, no, there is a speech. There's a speech about the biggest things that you've learned in class. But there's happy, and then what's the biggest things you've learned in class, and how are you going to use this to better your happy relationships in the future? I'm really proud of you for sticking with this. It's been a very exceptionally difficult time, but you're putting in the work, you're doing the things you need to do, and I'm really, really pleased to see your effort and progress. Thank you for that. I'm deeply humble and grateful for those things in such a trying time. But that is us figuring out how to navigate the conflict that is this current moment in time. And it's us being our best selves, trying to get there as best as possible. I'm proud of you. You're awesome.